Welcome back to Stories Worth Hearing. I'm your host, John Quick. Today I'm joined by Dr. Ben Blair, PhD in Philosophy and Education, the co-founder of Newlane University. Newlane is an accredited online university that's reimagining higher education through competency-based, self-paced learning that students can complete from anywhere. They currently offer an Associate of Arts in General Studies and Bachelor of Arts degrees in Philosophy and Liberal Arts, with specializations available in business administration or psychology. What truly sets Newlane apart is its accessibility and pricing model. Students pay $1,500 total for an associate's degree and $3,000 total for a bachelor's degree, a fraction of traditional tuition costs. On top of that, Newlane is accredited by the Distance Education Accrediting Commission, recognized by the U.S. Department of Education. In our conversation, Ben shares how his journey in philosophy and education led him to create Newlane, the challenges of disrupting a traditional system, and his vision for the future of higher education. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Ben Blair to Stories Worth Hearing.
Well, Ben, welcome to the show. I'm very excited you're on today.
I'm delighted to be here, Jonathan.
Well, this will be fun. I think it'll be awesome to hear from you. A lot of folks that tune into this podcast are entrepreneurs that kind of are looking for cutting edge ways to do things with cost savings in mind. And so I think this will be fun to talk about your journey. But before we go into kind of where you are and what you've built, tell me about your education journey and where that started. Where did that begin for you?
Well, I studied philosophy at the undergraduate level. So I got a degree in philosophy. It was kind of, I guess everyone has their story, how they picked their major. And then my family, I come from a family of educators. My dad was a professor of linguistics, and education was always, I'd say in one part, it was a value for our family. Like, yeah, you should get educated. But also my father he wrote language courses. So it wasn't just, you should get educated. There was an excitement about like building educational tools, building curriculum and that kind of thing that was just, I grew up thinking that was a really exciting kind of thing to work on. So then after undergraduate, I went to BYU for undergraduate. And then for graduate, I went to Columbia, Teachers College at Columbia. That's kind of their graduate educational school. And I studied philosophy and education. I kind of approached that program more excited about the education than the philosophy. I don't think of myself as, the prototypical philosopher. I was more excited about education and educational implications from philosophy, and it was I really enjoyed reading like John Dewey, Democracy and Education, and Jerome Bruner was one of my favorite. His books on the process of education and toward a theory of instruction, that kind of thing. So that's where I got my PhD in philosophy and education. I guess we'll talk more about Newlane, but that's kind of my academic background, unless there's something more specific you're looking for in there.
That's awesome. So what was maybe a moment, maybe a specific moment or a series of moments when you realize, man, there might be a different way of doing this?
Yeah, it was while I was in graduate school, and I imagine you can relate to this. There was just this time where it felt like it was kind of the Web 2.0, and things like MIT OpenCourseWare had just come on, and actually YouTube was just new, and Google had AdWords, and so there was online video, and then again this MIT OpenCourseWare, Yale Open Courses, Stanford Online, and it just felt like smokes. Their education is abundant, and anyone can get this fantastic education and free education all of a sudden, or inexpensive. The fact that they came from MIT, Yale, and Stanford, that these were kind of the leaders in that movement, made it so inexpensive. It was inexpensive, but also world-renowned, top of the line. This is the best, this is high quality stuff. So it was just kind of sensing this change in the world that like, hey, the doors are opened in ways they've never been before. So I mentioned the OpenCourseWares, these MOOCs that had come out. And then there was just this overarching open educational resources that are, hey, here are free resources. Here's a free textbook. Use however you'd like to use in whatever context you'd like. We're giving it to you for free. That kind of environment, that kind of attitude and approach just felt like things were changing in dramatic ways. So there was that, and maybe that's the answer to your question right there about what was it. It was the all of a sudden abundant accessibility to all this quality instruction. And then shortly after that, there was this kind of, I'll say, disappointment that it didn't translate to what I think everyone had kind of imagined, that was like, hey, now high quality education is available and accessible to everyone. Anyone can get a degree from Harvard and Stanford and Yale. It didn't quite reach there. It was, no, those credentials were still protected. You could watch the instruction from the best professors in the world, but getting the degree was still $140,000.
Yeah.
And that kind of disappointment was a big part of our, I guess we'll talk about Newlane shortly, but that's kind of energized me ever since with like, okay, well, we've got the instruction, and that was a huge piece. I don't want to discount or discard that was a world of difference. Every high quality instruction was readily available to everyone. But then the fact that it didn't translate into now anyone can earn a degree and that those prices were still going up just made it, what happened was instruction is readily available. And if you're kind of in this world, now I see it as, yeah, this is great. Instruction is a little piece of what education and what credentialing is about. It's a critical piece, and it's a piece that I'm probably the most excited about, and it's a piece I wish I could spend more time on, but it's not the complete circuit.
Yeah. So you are a co-founder of Newlane University. So you and some colleagues or friends, you see this opportunity or problem. Talk to me a little bit about the story behind actually then going to start a university, because I think that's got to be one of the probably toughest things to, it's an old wooden ship that is yet to course correct in how many hundreds of years. And so kudos for you for doing that. But talk to me a little bit about that story of like, you and your friends or colleagues saying, okay, there's an opportunity here, there's a problem, we could solve it. How do we do this?
Yeah, so my co-founder, Josh Stanley, and he and I were both going to school at Columbia, and we were both, like everything I've talked about, my excitement, we talked about this all the time. And we also talked about this, anticipating that the cost for a degree is going to dramatically drop. We're going to see just this open horizon for education. And in some ways we have, but in some ways, as I've mentioned, that when it comes to the credential, that's still a major financial hurdle. So we were, again, really excited about this and thought, well, how can we before we started thinking about a university, we were thinking about just building curriculum, being part of this movement and saying, hey, how can we leverage this abundance of instruction in ways that we would like to build curriculum? Like we were really enthusiastic about building curriculum. And my co-founder, Josh Stanley, he had developed kind of a platform, and that was the roots of what became Newlane University. And it was a platform that could draw from MIT OpenCourseWare or Yale Open Courses or Open Educational Resources or YouTube videos or other websites and just say, hey, we can string together this instruction and put together a course, and it can draw from multiple sources. And as we got into that a little ways, it became clear pretty quickly that the real monster to battle is a credential. And the real monster to battle is affordability, making this credential truly affordable and accessible without taking away from the quality. So certainly with plenty of naivete, we kind of struck out and said, hey, let's start a university based on this platform. And as we got into that, that's where we really came to understand really what goes into a credential. And this instruction piece, it's the piece I'm most excited about. I love it, but it's a small piece. I wish I could spend a lot of time on that piece in my work now. I don't. get to spend much time on that. I wish I could. Instead, I'm working on all these other pieces that are kind of behind the curtain for everyone else going to school. So to answer your question, like, how did we decide? It was, we didn't start out saying, hey, there's all this abundant high quality instruction, let's start a university. It was, there's all this abundant high quality instruction, let's find a way to leverage this. And then being confronted with, all of this instruction isn't translating, isn't really breaking down the walls that we had hoped it would. The cost for a degree is still astronomical. The accessibility for a degree is still very limited. And we were very interested in pursuing that more, like the dream that I think a lot of people had, that like, hey, we're really changing education. We're making it more accessible. We're making it more affordable. And that's kind of where Newlane started.
So, with most entrepreneurs, they are like in the middle of the project and they're like, what the hell am I even doing? Like,
Yeah.
are we crazy? Like, what's going on here? What kept you going? Because I can only imagine that there was many speed bumps, many times that, you thought to yourself, man, this is way harder than I thought it would ever be. What kept you going to see it through to the finish line, especially to get accredited? That's got to be a huge, talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, and I mean, I would push back on saying we've reached the finish line. Like it's still an everyday battle of like, okay, how are we doing this? But getting accredited was like, had we known what was going to be required to get accredited, maybe I should just say it's good we didn't know what we were getting into when we got into it. Because becoming accredited is basically, we had to develop all the policies, all of the grading policy, the refund policy, the agreements students sign, all these things that you don't think about when you think about what a school is. But we had to write out, develop the policy framework comparable to other accredited schools. And it's just, the two of us. So what kept us going? I mean, we did have just a lot of enthusiasm, and this is something that I loved working on for a while. I loved building curriculum, loved the idea of a university that could be affordable and accessible to more and more people. What really kept us going was seeing that we could realize in part what our aspirations were on a very limited scale, but that we could see a student who, so I'll give an example of a student who graduated a couple years ago, and she had gone to college before, and she had done all right. She'd done fine in college, but then she started a family and put her husband through his graduate work, and her degree kind of took a backseat, and it never made sense for her financially. It never made sense for her schedule couldn't accommodate going to school because she had kids to take care of and a house to manage while her husband was working and these kinds of things. But then when we could offer her, hey, here's a chance where you can transfer the credits, you can complete your degree here. And the kind of shift that made in her from it just couldn't finish college and felt like a college dropout to no, college wouldn't work with me. And now Newlane can work with me. It's not going to break the bank, and it's not going to take me away from my kid's baseball game or track meet. I can get my degree. So she completed her degree. She's now in her last semester of a master's degree at San Francisco State University. And so one part, it's just this accomplishment of, okay, now she has a master's degree, but there's this deeper shift of like how she saw herself and how others saw her and how she carried herself in the world that is not a 180 shift, but a total change in perspective for her family, for her acquaintances, for her professors in her new program. And seeing that, and I could repeat the same story. I mean, we don't have a lot of graduates, but we have a handful, and I could repeat the same kind of story for everyone so far, that kind of change that was enabled by this, what we had done to kind of hack college and say, look, this is, and when I say hack, I don't mean hack in a way of like, hey, we've figured out a way to trick it, but we've figured out a way to address the critical pieces like completing a curriculum, a degree program, having assessments that are secure and reliable, having a transcript that is permanent and records mastery, those kinds of things. Being able to address those while also keeping the price to, $39 a month and accessible at, self-paced so people can do it whenever it works for them. That because we did that and, whatever hassle or whatever painful documents we were writing or discouraging comments we got from people as we were trying to raise funds or that kind of thing paled in comparison to the doors we could open and the changed lives we could see and be a part of.
That's awesome. So for folks listening, this is one of the coolest, there's many cool parts, but one of the coolest parts to this is we're going to go into here in a second. But the affordability factor of this university is ludicrous. I mean, when I went to college, I went to a private university that was, I don't know, $25,000, $30,000 a year. I had many friends who just took out full loans for the full price, all 4 years, $100,000 of debt the day after they graduate college. And you almost like are working out of that hole for your entire life. And especially if you go on to get a master's or a doctorate, you could be several $100,000 in debt before you even start your quote unquote real job. So Ben, talk to me a little bit about some of the things that are different about your university than they would be a traditional university. Because I think a couple of these things are game changers. And I think a year from now, you guys are going to be growing so fast, you won't know how to keep up.
So differences in terms of cost?
Yeah, just, the traditional, a mom and dad that, a normal mom and dad are going to be thinking, I got to send my kid if they want to go to college. They're going to they have to go somewhere. It's going to cost them $40,000 a year.
Yeah.
And they have to physically be somewhere or go to an online university. Won't say which one, but it's going to be the same price. They just don't have to go somewhere.
Right.
I think the fact that you all have this affordability piece is huge. So talk to us a little bit about what that looks like for a student if they're coming into your program.
Yeah, well, just to talk in very nuts and bolts, when a student signs up, they register and pay $249, and then they pay $39 a month until they reach $1,500 for a 2-year degree. So if a student comes in and they don't have any college credit, or they don't have an associate degree, to get a bachelor's degree would cost $3,000. If to get an associate degree would be $1,500. And so part of it is just the ticket price. Okay, $3,000 or $1,500, that's not backbreaking debt. And then the other part is the payment terms, that $249 to register and then $39 a month. And our kind of ethos on that is we want students to be able to pay out of pocket. This isn't something you need to go get a big loan for. It's not something that, parents need to sacrifice for decades, or it's not something that is, reserved for people who are already wealthy and, they can pay $140,000 or whatever for their degree. Now, it's not, I have children and they've gone to traditional schools, and I'm a big fan of traditional college education. I mean, I think it's a great occasion for students to, I'm especially thinking of kind of 18-year-olds leaving the nest, that it's a great opportunity to do some kind of low stakes adulting and a quality education and moving away and having these kinds of opportunities that a college can afford you. But the cost has, just spiraled out of control. And I think in large part, at least in some part, because we're so reliant on grants and loans, that we're just saying, okay, education is really, really valuable. You need to do it. If you don't think you can afford it, that's okay. We'll loan you the money. You can have a loan so you can get through it. And then after it, you can pay off. But don't really think about the ticket price because it's so high. And our kind of approach is to say, it's really valuable. A college education is we could make a case. It is as valuable. It is worth $200,000 because of what the kind of mindset and the kind of different perspectives you can learn about and engage. And if the only way to get that were to be the only place this information is available is at this really expensive university, then there may be a case to saying that's where everyone should go. But we think, again, going back to how we started and just the abundance of this instructional content, high quality instructional content, if we can gather that and put it together in a curriculum and assess and verify that a student has indeed mastered this stuff, then we can award a credential and recognize that that is as meaningful as any other credential. So I guess that gets into the nuts and bolts of $249 to register, $39 a month, and then the ticket price that is $1,500 or $3,000, again, that's payable out of pocket. People don't have to. Going to college, getting a high quality education doesn't mean, and you have to have backbreaking debt or be wealthy or, get a super competitive scholarship.
And somebody could, just like your one story, they could, let's say they did 2 years somewhere else, forgot about it for 5 years. They could come in and transfer a bunch of credits and finish the degree with you all, right?
Yeah. Now we charge per degree, so there's no discount in that $1,500 or $3,000 for someone who has transfer credits, but it does cut down on the number of courses a student needs to take to get their degree. So it does cut down on the time it would take to get the credential.
That's amazing. So folks, I want to make sure that folks really take this in, because I think almost everybody that I talk to, they're planning to spend $40,000 a year on their kids' education, and no other options really exist other than online, but same cost. And so for literally $250 up front and $39 a month, your kids can go to college, which is pretty amazing. $1,500 for an associate's, $3,000 for a bachelor degree. I'm not aware of another fully accredited, high caliber online university that exists that is this price point. And so folks, I'm going to put all the links to the college in the description. Just as a little factoid, somebody in my family is going through this process with this university. I found it so fascinating. And we went in there and we applied, and literally there is a pretty awesome onboarding process. You get an email sequence, you sign up for basically like a Zoom call with one of your admissions folks. And it's a very organized process that I've experienced so far. So I'm pleased from a user standpoint, which is, you're over delivering in that regard when it comes to what the price point actually is. So folks, check out the links. I think it'll be encouraging for you to see that there are other options out there for you. And, for folks that have, maybe went and did a year or two of college and forgot about it for 5 or 6 years, this is a viable option to finish that degree without going bankrupt or breaking your piggy bank. Last thought, one of my last thoughts or questions to you is, what does the future hold for specifically Newlane? And then what do you think about the future of education overall? It's kind of a two-parter. I know that's a pretty big question, but would love to hear your thoughts on that.
So the future of Newlane, we currently offer an associate degree in general studies, a bachelor's degree in philosophy, and a bachelor's in liberal arts with there's an optional business specialization or a psychology specialization. So the immediate future is we'll be expanding those specializations in the liberal arts. Kind of a strategic decision on focusing on the liberal arts is that we can kind of expand. A lot of specializations can fit under liberal arts. And then we'll also be offering master's degrees, we hope as soon as 2026. So in terms of our offerings, we anticipate expanding our offerings. In terms of our students, we hope to continue to grow. We've been on a pretty remarkable trajectory, especially the beginning of this year, where we've been growing at a pretty regular pace, month over month. And I guess I'd say what I hope for and imagine for the future of education. I do feel like we are part of a movement and part of a kind of pioneering movement that I anticipate and hope will continue to be manifest. And that is just that education is it's a moral right. And making high quality education exclusive, I think is immoral. And I believe that the future of education will be bright. I hope that we can be a part of, if not by name, at least in kind of the culture that we're trying to build, of making education more accessible, breaking down barriers, opening the doors and the gates for more and more people to receive a high quality education and kind of move on.
That's great. Well, 30 minutes here, Ben, has gone by in a flash, literally. Any last minute thoughts here before we head out?
Well, maybe two parts, and maybe this is more nuts and bolts, but I hope it also kind of conveys how we're able to offer our degrees in a way that's so ridiculously affordable compared to other options.
Yeah.
And maybe a first part that I didn't mention on the price, that if a student already has an associate degree, then a bachelor's degree is only $1,500. And then the way a student passes a course, maybe just to talk a little bit about this, is a course at Newlane is made up of lessons, and lessons are made up of objectives. So an objective would be something discrete, like explain the process of photosynthesis. And the way a student passes a course at Newlane is they first self-assess mastery of all of the objectives in a course. Then they take a computer-scored multiple-choice course exam. Then they do a project that's often like a paper they write or a presentation they make. And up until that point, there's nothing to stop a student from cheating through all of that. Like if they want to say, yes, I've mastered everything, and if they want to cheat on that course exam or, randomly guess until they get it all right, and if they want to put the project description into ChatGPT and say, hey, write a project that meets all these criteria, they can do that. But it doesn't serve them, because the last step, and the only step where they get credit, and the only real hard cost for us to deliver a course, and by extension a degree, is we call it a course hearing, where a student meets one-on-one in a video conference like this with a professor. It's like a 30 or 45 minute conversation. It's friendly, it's personable, but it's also very focused on, and the professor's role is to verify that the student has mastered the course materials or not yet. And if you have a background, an expertise in something, and I said, okay, you have 30 to 45 minutes to talk with someone and you can have a very focused conversation, you can get a really good handle in that long if they've mastered the stuff or not yet.
Yeah.
And at the end of that, the professor either says, hey, I'm satisfied you've mastered the materials, and they'll also ask about their project, and the student needs to be able to answer authoritatively about their project, which that's kind of the check. Like if you just had ChatGPT write it, it doesn't serve you.
Yeah, you didn't learn much.
Right. And then, or the professor will say, hey, I'm not yet satisfied. There still seems to be some confusion about photosynthesis or whatever. Go back and review that, and then we'll have a follow-up hearing. And that's how a student passes a course. And that is how, all of everything leading up to that, we're leveraging open educational resources. And we've built a platform that is highly attuned to these objectives and organizing objectives and sequencing them into a course, so that we can get to a point where the hard cost is with that professor who's reviewing the project and hosting that course hearing. And because we've done that, that is how our model is unique, and that is what allows us to offer, a degree for $1,500 or $3,000.
That's cool. Well, folks, you heard it here first. You can get an associate's degree fully accredited for $1,500. You got to earn it, or a bachelor's degree for $3,000. I just think it's really awesome. I'm going to put all the links into the podcast description. Ben, we wish you nothing but success over at Newlane University. Kudos for you for being an educational entrepreneur. I don't meet many, so I think that's pretty awesome. You're in a field on your own.
Yeah, and I don't know that I can recommend it to anyone else, but
yeah, I'm sure it's been quite the ride. Well, we hope everybody has a great rest of their day, and until next time, I'm John Quick. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Jonathan.